What's up? I'm Nate. This is my kitchen. Let's make honey butter chicken biscuits. Today we're using chicken thighs because they're fattier and a little bit less prone to being overcooked. You can use chicken breasts, but this is what I prefer. I'd cut the thighs into 2 pieces and the breasts into 3. If you're using thighs, you might want to trim the excess fat. Or don't, I don't really care. It'll probably taste better anyway. Because you want even pieces of chicken, pound these out. Now that the chicken is prepped, let's talk brine, specifically buttermilk brine. Because we want to flavor the chicken with the brine, we're going to add some seasonings to it. Let's start with our dry ingredients. Starting with white pepper, I'm using about a teaspoon. White pepper is beneficial because it'll mix more easily into the brine than fresh black pepper. Next we have cayenne pepper. It's optional, but why not? Add as much as you like. Go crazy. I typically do. I'm using significant restraint for the purposes of this video. And then onion powder. I'm using about a tablespoon here to bring some onion flavor to the party. For southern fried chicken, onion powder is a no-brainer. Garlic powder, like onion powder, is another no-brainer. I'm again using about a tablespoon here. And a little bit of a random, I enjoy adding a bit of chipotle to add a smoky element to the fried chicken. I'm using about a tablespoon here. Not required by any means, but highly recommended if you have some lying around. So now we'll move on to our wet ingredients. Our marinades and brines, what really tenderizes the meat is not the oil or seasonings, but the acid. For this fried chicken preparation, we're using 3 types. First, we'll have the pickle / cornichon juice. I'm using cornichon juice, which is basically a younger cucumber used for pickling, but we're only using the brine. This is just what I had. Normal pickle brine is totally kosher. Additionally, we'll be using pepperoncini juice. We're using it for the vinegar inside, for sure, but the peppers inside have also lended their fruity flavors as well as a slight kick to the brine. Combined with the cayenne pepper and hot honey, this will result in dimensions of spicy flavors. Buttermilk, which is the main component of the brine. It's acidic enough to begin tenderizing the chicken, but the buttermilk itself helps the meat stay juicy throughout the frying. We're also going to be adding honey for a reason that's similar to why we added the pepperoncini juice. Similar to the heat, I want to add layers of sweet elements to the brine, and so that's why we're adding the honey earlier to layer the sweetness throughout the hub chub. So now we're going to make the brine. There aren't hard and fast rules to how much brine you need. Ultimately, you just need enough to cover the chicken. For 2 chicken thighs, 2 cups should be more than enough. For the pepperoncini and cornichon brines that you'll add to the buttermilk, you can mix and match, but you probably want about a cup total of each brine. If you want it spicy, go ahead and just add a cup of the pepperoncini brine. I mean, fuck it. You could add a cup of hot sauce like Tabasco or Louisiana if you want, but I'm going about half cornichon, half pepperoncini into the buttermilk. I just forgot the hot sauce, so it's not going in today. And so once the wet ingredients are in, we're going to add our dry seasonings. Also, if you're feeling something outside the ones I mentioned earlier, feel free to play around and see what you like. Once everything is into the brine, we're going to whisk to combine. Once mixed, add the chicken into the brine. Now, you can really do this as long or as little as you want. If you're hungover and need some breakfast, cool. Let the chicken chill in the brine for 30 minutes. On the other hand, if you know you're going to be hungover tomorrow, make the brine the day before. There will be a difference as long as it's been in there for at least 30 minutes. 4 hours is ideal, but hey, sometimes cooking isn't always planned in advance. Cover in cling wrap and leave in the fridge. Now we'll get started making the biscuits, adapting a recipe from Sean Brock. First, place the butter in your freezer to firm up, maybe about 10 minutes or so. We're going to grate it to make it easier to incorporate it into the dough. Freezing it firms the butter enough to shred it with a grater without it melting. The biscuits we're making today use only 5 ingredients, most of which you'll already have in your pantry. First, we're going to measure out 3 1/2 cups of self-rising flour, a tablespoon of salt, and 1/2 tablespoon of sugar, and we're going to whisk those to combine. Once combined, begin grating your butter. Once you get near the end of your butter, be careful with your grating because I doubt you want to grate your fingers or having your skin grated into your biscuits. That would suck.
Begin incorporating the butter into the flour with your hands. Squeezing the butter and flour together, breaking them up into smaller pieces, making sure that it's evenly dispersed into the flour mixture. This will help create the biscuit layers down the line.
Now we'll add our wet ingredients, or ingredient, which is buttermilk, into the flour. We're only lightly incorporating it into the flour so that we can begin kneading with our hands as soon as possible. We are trying to prevent gluten development, which will impede the dough's ability to rise and create layers in the biscuits we all love. I combined with the spatula until just mixed together and homogeneous. I don't want to get my hands too dirty just yet because the mixture will just clump on my fingers, which will make me, and therefore you, go back and forth to the sink, which is just a pain in the ass. We're not looking for the dough to be really smooth at all just yet. You'll know you're in a good spot once the mixture stops sticking to your hands. Once combined, placed onto a floured work surface to knead. Wood cutting boards are best, but don't be afraid to get your counter a little dirty. You might notice that it's a bit too wet. That's okay, just add a bit more flour. The humidity, or lack thereof, can impact how much flour you need. If it's a little too sticky, it's too hydrated, and add some more flour, maybe a tablespoon at the time. If it's a little too stiff, you might need some more buttermilk, a teaspoon at a time. Knead the dough until just smooth. It'll also continue to hydrate while it rests in the fridge, so even a little too dry beforehand is okay. Once smooth, wrap in plastic wrap and let rest for about 15 minutes in the fridge so the butter doesn't have a chance to come up to room temperature. In the meantime, preheat the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. PSA, if you don't have a bench scraper, get one. It's literally $6 on Amazon, top 5 kitchen tool all time. Once your dough is rested, take it out of the refrigerator because we're about to roll. Like most pie doughs, this biscuit dough needs to be layered. Like earlier, lightly flour your work surface so that the dough doesn't stick. It also doesn't hurt to flour your rolling pin. We'll begin by rolling out the dough into about a 1/4 inch high round. It'll look pretty rough at first, but the edges will round out as we laminate the dough. The laminating process just means that you're rolling out the dough, then folding the ends to make another rectangle, and then rolling out that rectangle into a round again, and ultimately layering the butter throughout the dough.
The water content in the butter will steam, creating layers that will help the biscuit rise in the oven.
Sean Brock's recipe recommends 2 laminations, but I think 3 to 4 makes a better product and is worth the extra 2 minutes out of your day. If you don't want to, whatever, I'm not stopping you.
If you have some time once you're done laminating, I'd recommend putting the dough back in the fridge or freezer for about 5 minutes, but it's not necessary.
Once you're ready to cut your biscuits, roll out the dough so it's about a 1/2 inch high to give it appropriate height to handle the fried chicken. We're going to be using a 3-inch biscuit cutter for this application, but you can really go as wide or as narrow as you want. Flour both sides of the dough so the biscuit cutter doesn't stick to the dough. That will actually impact how it rises in the oven later on.
You should be able to get at least 6 biscuits from the first roll, but you can always roll out the scraps again and you should be able to cut out a few more. My cast iron fits 7, but yours may fit differently.
Brush the top of the biscuits with a little bit of butter, some salt, and then we're going to bake until they have risen significantly, nearly doubled, and have browned at the top. Now we're going to go through the dredging process. For the dredge, you'll see a lot of the same seasonings that we put in the brine, plus a few randoms. We have white pepper, turmeric for color, onion and garlic powder, chipotle, paprika, and cayenne. We're going to add all of these to the flour and whisk to combine. I'd err on adding a little bit more than you'd think, since most of these seasonings will be left in the excess flour anyway. Plus, it's pretty hard to over-season any type of flour dredge. Once combined, you're going to add a few spoonfuls of the buttermilk brine to the flour dredge. The droplets will clump with the flour to create crunchy bits that will coat the chicken, that will in turn create not necessarily a thicker coating, but a crunchier one. Trust me, it works. Once the seasonings and the buttermilk are added, place the chicken into the flour. Everyone swears by the wet hand, dry hand method, in which one hand is used for dry ingredients and one hand is used for wet, but that requires a lot of discipline I don't always have. So ultimately, make sure the chicken is coated completely. No dry spots. For frying, we're using canola oil, but you can really use any high heat oil. However, I'd recommend against using grapeseed or avocado. You're wasting your money and the oil. We are frying at around 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Many fried chicken recipes that don't use buttermilk will actually recommend you frying around 375 degrees Fahrenheit. However, the milk solids in the buttermilk will burn at a temperature that high, so we're actually going for a lower temp for this application. Know that the temperature of the oil will drop the second you put the chicken in, so adjust the temperature just a bit once the chicken goes in. And by that I mean just raise it just a little bit once you place the chicken in. I personally like using a thermometer to ensure the correct temperature, but if you don't have one, the chicken will still turn out well once you put it in. The turmeric was added partially to help tell when the chicken is done. It makes a perfect golden brown crust, which is a great indicator of when the chicken is done. But if I had to estimate, each piece takes about 5 to 6 minutes of frying. Once it's a perfect golden brown, it's ready. It will continue cooking once you take it out of the oil for about 2 to 3 minutes. So you want to take it out a little bit earlier than you would think. Once it's a perfect golden brown, it's ready. It'll continue cooking right as it comes out of the oil, and when it does, salt it just a bit. Repeat with the remaining chicken pieces and let rest as we make the honey butter. For the honey butter, we'll be using red chili flakes, sage, butter, and honey. We're letting some inspiration from Joshua Weissman, who adds sage to his honey butter. Sage goes well with poultry and pork, and his sandwich is no different. Red chili flakes and sage are optional, but adds dimension to the biscuit. First, toast the red chili flakes until aromatic on medium heat. Add the honey and saute. Once it bubbles up aggressively like so, add the butter and stir to emulsify the sauce. Once homogeneous, you're ready to assemble. And that's really all there is to it. There's something to say about simplicity. The assembly is simple. You've been there, I've been there, mostly on Sunday mornings. Open up your biscuit if you're being filmed. Do it a bit dramatically so you can see the smoke come from the biscuit. Layer on some honey butter on the bottom. Place the chicken on top.
Then top with more honey butter.
Top with biscuit. Eat biscuit. Done. Amen. Hook 'em horns.